Alrighty, we'll wait a second as we everybody, but we'll go ahead and start in about 5-10 seconds. Oh, looks like we're already done meeting everybody. Perfect. Awesome. I'm Alex Van Brunt, and my companion here is Manuel. You want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yep, and my name is Emanuela Mitrova.
We're part of the developer relations team in the security business unit. So today we'll be talking about automating ransomware remediation with the VMware Carbon Black Cloud SDK. Go ahead and get started. We've got just a short disclaimer. Things may change in the future, so what you're seeing is where it's currently at, but we're constantly improving it and making adjustments, so things may change in the future. So a quick agenda. We're going to talk about kind of ransomware today, some of the things we're seeing in the news, just to kind of set some stage, and then what VMware Carbon Black offers from resources, as well as kind of a setup configuration standpoint. And then we'll go ahead and jump into the Python SDK demo. So ransomware today, I always like to kind of grab some news articles that are hitting all the time. It's a constant stream. I actually looked again today, and there's a ton of recent attacks. These ones were from a couple weeks ago. What we can see is the focus of a lot of the ransomware attacks have been on healthcare organizations, US cities, universities, as well as giant tech companies. So these are just to name some of the few. We also had the Colonial Pipeline, which happened a while ago. But even a month later, we're noticing that there is still fallout from the attack, that there was personal information that was stolen and is currently being sold and kind of trying to make some more profit out of it. And then we also have a security agency, or rather a security news group, HelpNet Security, where they are reporting that within the first half of 2021, we've had triple-digit increase in ransomware attacks, which is just crazy to see that what was a not so big attack has dramatically increased. Which actually leads into a quote from Christopher Krebs. He's a director of cybersecurity infrastructure and security agency in the United States Department of Homeland Security, or rather he was a previous director. He's not currently the active director, but in a committee in early this year, around I think May timeframe, the statement he made was what we have here, which was what was a low-dollar online nuisance has exploded into a multi-billion-dollar global racketing, and he equates that to a kind of almost second pandemic with the impacts that it has. So while we're currently dealing with COVID and the whole fallout of all of that, we're also seeing that this malware is attacking those health agencies as well, putting them at risk, which just causes this ever-largening and big problem. This is my so from a monetary standpoint, since ransomware tends to have a huge impact on businesses, there was kind of a data grab at one point from all the different incidents that happened over kind of the last year or so. And they categorized them by sort of markets and groups. So in particular, this one was kind of publicized with the healthcare organization. So they were calling out their healthcare one, which we can see was about 1.27 million. And this is the kind of the bill for either them paying or on top of the loss of revenue. So that's kind of a cumulative outcome of what happened during that incident. So we can just see that the impact that one of these attacks can have can be huge. And this is just some of the numbers. Certainly there's outliers in either direction that we see much larger costs. So what can VMware Carbon Black do for you? So to kind of start off, if you're not super familiar with VMware Carbon Black Cloud, we have a new malware lab that our wonderful support team and various people within our business unit have created. It's a great walkthrough of Carbon Black Cloud and kind of gives you a rundown of some of the different things that you can see and glean from the product. So definitely if you're new and trying to learn some more and play with it, definitely recommend taking a look at this as it you can walk through. So in particular, for ransomware attacks, the biggest thing you can do from a Carbon Black Cloud perspective is having your policies tuned. So we have a new tech zone, which is where I try and provide a bunch of resources. So we've got a good, better, best article, which will kind of walk you through different kind of policy configurations that'll give you different varying levels of protection, as well as the type of restrictions that it causes. Sometimes you may not be able to apply a highly restrictive policy because your developers may need an adjusted one for whatever they're doing with, say, PowerShell or command.exe. Otherwise, maybe the sales or the marketing team could have a more restricted one because they're not using that. So this kind of walks through some of that. We also have our ransomware specific protection. So there are pieces of our policy configuration that try and preemptively block the attack before it happens. So I do recommend taking a look at that as well. That is, I believe, posted in our community exchange, which I've provided all the links at the bottom here, and we'll make this PowerPoint presentation available at the end if you need to get access to them. But there are ways to toggle and make that so it'll block it before things have even kind of taken a stance. And then lastly, our TAO team, which is our threat research team, are constantly posting threat research docs and different things they're finding, which will help you kind of protect yourself against the most recent attacks, which will include hashes, the IPs, all sorts of information pieces that you can use to enhance what you're looking for as well as to block. So I definitely recommend taking a look at all three of these. Before we jump into the demo, Mr. Robot was a pretty popular TV show there for a while. And one kind of quote that I saw from the TV series was, "People's always make the best exploits. I've never found it hard to hack most people. If you listen to them, watch them, their vulnerabilities are like neon signs screwed into their heads," which goes to show that even with all the configurations we can do, there are times that you will have to go through and remediate and fix things. So that's where we hope to show you some of the things we can do with the Python SDK. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and let Emmanuel take over.
Thank you, Alex. I'm not going to share my screen. First, I know that what we're going to show is just a portion of what we have implemented in the Python SDK. And in this demo, we're going to show how we can start an investigation on event, which we think it's malicious, and how we can do certain actions so that we can rectify it or at least mitigate it. So this script offers just the options for simplicity. The first option is checking for any network events that are for a remote desktop or SSH connections, and they originated from devices without a sensor. So the script is offering for this sensor, for this device to be installed a sensor so that it's we know that every device we access is safe. The second option that we're going to see is more interesting. And for this option, we'd like to pick all of the alerts that originated in the last day. Why? Because we think that in the last day or so, a certain event was happened, and we'd like to check all of the alerts that were generated on that day so that we can check indeed whether a malicious attack happened on our devices. So the script is showing initial information that is showing a description about the event that was generated. Based on that description, we might think that this is not a malicious event, so we are offered the option to do nothing. Of course, this is the least invasive option. We can also send an email so that this device is reimaged, or we can rotate the credentials. The rest of the options are offering actually certain actions to be done on the device. So they're more invasive, and they're like ordered in the most invasive way that we can apply on a device. So another thing that is done here as an investigation is that we are checking whether there is any increase in file modifications. Why? Because this might lead us to think that indeed a malicious event happened on our device. And also, this script is checking what's the status of our device. If it's in status bypass, this means that our device is not safe, so we should change the status. And let's go through the options that this script is offering, and we can go through the code how those actions can be applied. We can see that with just a few lines of code, we can do a lot of things so that we can rectify a certain event. The first option that is offered here, besides the first two options, is to actually add this process that generated the event to a watch list. Why we might want to do that? Because if we are not sure that indeed a ransomware happened or some malicious event happened, what we can do is create a watch list and continue monitoring this process. So every time this process is started on our device, we're going to get an alert that this process was started. So we can check how often this process was started or what is doing on our device. The next option is if we know that this process is indeed a malicious one, so we can add it to a blacklist, so we can ban that process. The result of this would be that every time this process is started, it will be terminated on our device. So it is the safest option if we think that indeed this process is malicious. Of course, the Python SDK is offering also the ability to add it to a whitelist if we, of course, know that this process is not malicious. It's something that our company would like to allow, we can add it to a whitelist so that no events are generated for this process. The next option is actually changing the policy to our device to more strict. Let's say that our policy is not strict enough. It's allowing some malicious software to be installed or some processes to be run, and we don't want to do that. So we can change the policy by checking what are the current policies that are available and changing to a more strict one. The next option is, I think, the most interesting one, is actually deleting the file from the machine. Why this option is so interesting? Because we can create a session with the remote device and we can do certain operations, like we can delete a file, we can upload a file, we can start or kill a process. Why this is so important and so effective? Let's think of a use case. Let's say that we have 100 devices and we know that on some of our devices, some malicious files were uploaded. So what we can do is, of course, clean our devices manually, like log in on our devices, check whether such file exists and check our folders and delete those files. But that's kind of tedious work. So what we can do, we can automate all this by creating just a simple script with a few lines of code. We're going to see how we can do that, of course, in the demo. And what we can do is create live response sessions to all of the devices, walk through all of the directories, check whether such files exist and delete them. And we can do that with just a simple Python script. And of course, the last option is the most invasive one. It's just quarantining the device if we think that indeed something bad happened to our device and it's better to quarantine that device instead of doing something less invasive. So let's check one of the options. For example, we can choose to see what are the policies available on our machine, and we are seeing what is our current policy. We can change it by selecting any of those policies, well, depending on what we think it's appropriate. For the purpose of the demo, I'm just going to choose the same option. And all of this is done for every alert that was generated in the last day. So I'm going to stop this script so that I can show you how this actually is created and what are the actions that you need to do in order for us to create such a script. So the first option that we have discussed is checking whether we have network events that originated because of remote desktop or SSH connections. So we are just creating a simple query that is checking for all of the enriched events that are of certain type and that match a certain criteria. That's all we need to do. Then we are just checking whether all of those devices that created such events include a sensor. If there is a device that does not have a sensor, we can just say to the user, you should install a sensor so that you're safe. The more interesting option, as we've mentioned, is getting alerts for a specific time. And you can see here that, again, it's done with just a simple statements like selecting all of the CB analytics alerts, although we can, of course, check all of the 3 types of alerts. And here we are just filtering by minimum severity. Why? Because we think that, for example, alerts with severity less than 5 or less than 6 or whatever are not important, so we can just filter out by severity. The other thing that we can filter out is by a specific period. For example, we know that a certain event happened within the last day, so we care only about the alerts for that day. So we can filter out like that. Then the next option that we've discussed in this script is checking what are the file modification trends, because this might indicate that someone is messing with our device. So what we can do here is get the events that were for file modifications for the day of the alert. And also we can check what's the average file modification alerts for the last week before this event. How we can do that? Well, again, just with a simple query that is checking all of the enriched events that are of certain type, in this case, file modifications, and we care only about a certain device. So if there is an increase in file modification, we are saying, okay, you should check this device. The next thing that we are checking is the status of the device. How we can do that? By just selecting the device and checking the status. It is as simple as that. And if the status is in bypass status, then this is then our device is not safe, so we should consider changing the status. And now let's go through the different options or actions we can do in order for us to rectify or mitigate some malicious events. So the first option that we have seen in the menu, besides, of course, the options that are not doing anything, are creating watch lists. So how to create a watch list? It is with just a few lines of code. By the way, we have a lot of guides that we have created, and it's in our documentation that are explaining what we have done in this script. So in this, we are creating a watch list, we are creating a report, and we are including the specific process as an indicator of compromise. And that's it. We're saving the watch list, and every time this process is started, we're going to see an alert created for that process. The next option is even simpler. It's banning the process. So the only thing we need to do is just create a reputation override stating that this process should be included in the blacklist. That's it. That's the only thing we need to do in order for us to terminate the process every time it started on our device. The next option is first, of course, selecting the device, and we would like to select all of the available policies that we have created through our CBC UI. Of course, we can create additional ones which are more strict so that we can use them for devices that are vulnerable to attacks. In this case, we're just printing all of the available options, and the only thing we need to do in order for us to change the policy is execute just this line of code. So just a simple update of policy, nothing else. The next option that I've mentioned, I think it's the most interesting. It's creating a live response session. and then doing certain actions directly on the remote machine. So how we can do that? Well, selecting the device, and then we can say we would like to get a live response session. That's it. We don't need to do anything else in order for us to start the session. And after that, we can invoke certain actions that are done directly on our remote machine that could be synchronous and asynchronous. So we can, for example, create a queue of a few actions that we need applied, and we're just starting those actions. And for the demo, we said that would like to delete a certain file. And we're doing that with just one line of code that is saying delete the file, and we should provide the path to the file, nothing else. The last option was quarantining the device, and it was even simpler than the rest of those that we have already mentioned. And this option is just includes, again, selecting the device because we'd like to quarantine a specific device, and then stating would like to quarantine that, and that's it, nothing else. After we clean up the device, we can, of course, change the status to unquarantine that, and it's done again with just one line of code. And I guess that's all for the demo. So please take your survey, and thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, you're welcome to ask them.
Emmanuel mentioned a link to some guides. I've included that in the chat as well. So I'll say link to some of our other CBC SDK guides. But feel free to either unmute yourself or post in the chat if you have any questions. We've got another 5-10 minutes if you have any. Alrighty, that's it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoy the rest of VMworld.